I thought the captain of Chicago's biggest football team was joking when he looked me in the eyes and said, "Pretend to be my boyfriend. I was just a freelance designer, and he was America's golden athlete. We were never supposed to fall in love. But one fake relationship, one heartbreaking misunderstanding, and one championship game changed everything." The first time Mason Carter spoke to me, he didn't say hello. He didn't ask my name. He looked me straight in the eyes inside a crowded sports complex in downtown Chicago and said, "I need you to pretend to be my boyfriend." For a full 5 seconds, I honestly thought he had mistaken me for someone else. People were everywhere. Professional football players walked through the lobby after practice. Journalists stood near the entrance. Fans waited behind security barriers hoping for photos. And standing right in front of me was Mason Carter, the 27-year-old captain of the Chicago Titans, one of the most recognizable football players in the country. Meanwhile, I was Ethan Brooks, 24, a freelance graphic designer who had been hired for a 3-week branding project with the team. I had never spoken to Mason before. I barely looked up from my laptop, so naturally I laughed. "I'm sorry," I said. "You definitely have the wrong guy." "I don't." His answer came so calmly that it erased my smile. "I know exactly who you are." That made me even more uncomfortable. "You know me? You've been designing our new community campaign." I blinked. "You noticed." "I notice more than people think." Before I could ask another question, Mason glanced around the lobby. Several reporters were watching him. One photographer had already lifted his camera. Mason lowered his voice. "Walk with me. I don't think that's a good idea. It'll look even stranger if we stand here arguing." He wasn't wrong. Within seconds, phones were already pointing in our direction. I sighed. "Fine. 5 minutes." We stepped outside the building into the cool afternoon air. The streets buzzed with traffic. Across the road, fans waited behind metal barricades, hoping to catch another glimpse of the team's biggest star. Mason kept walking until we reached a quiet courtyard beside the training facility. Finally, he stopped. "I wasn't joking. I figured that much. I need someone the media won't suspect." I crossed my arms. "And somehow that's me? You don't chase attention. You've been here almost a week. You never asked for a selfie. You never interrupted practice. You never tried to impress anyone. You just do your job." I shrugged. "That's usually how jobs work." For the first time, the famous captain smiled. It was brief, real, almost relieved. Then it disappeared. "My family wants me dating someone they approve of. So don't. If it were that simple, I wouldn't be asking you." I stayed quiet. He continued. "My parents are major investors in several businesses. They've spent years introducing me to people they think fit the image. Every dinner becomes another setup. Every charity event turns into another rumor. And now a celebrity gossip account thinks I'm secretly engaged to someone I've only met twice." I frowned. "So, your solution is pretending to date a complete stranger? A stranger they won't expect. You have your own career. You're not part of my circle. You don't benefit from pretending. I need someone I can trust." I laughed again. "You don't even know me." "I know enough." That answer landed harder than I expected. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A message from my project manager. "Where are you? The sponsor meeting starts in 3 minutes." I held up the screen. "I have to go." Mason nodded. "I understand." He reached into his jacket and handed me a simple white business card. No logo. No title. Just his personal number. "If you decide to hear the full plan." He paused. "Call me." I slipped the card into my pocket mostly to be polite. "I'm probably not going to." "I know." He smiled again. "But I hope you do." The sponsor meeting lasted nearly 2 hours. I tried paying attention. Really. But every few minutes, my mind drifted back to the most bizarre conversation I'd ever had. Pretend to be my boyfriend. Who even asked something like that? By the time I packed my laptop, the building had almost emptied. I headed toward the parking garage, already thinking about dinner. That's when I heard voices. Not loud, just around the corner. Can't keep avoiding them forever. It was Mason. Another voice answered. An older man. Calm. Firm. You know what your parents expect. I know. The charity gala is next month. The investors will be there. They've already invited Claire. I said I know. You need to stop making life harder than it has to be. Silence. Then Mason spoke again, quieter this time. I'm tired of living someone else's plan. The conversation ended before I could hear anything else. I stepped away before anyone noticed me. For the first time all day, I realized Mason hadn't looked arrogant. He'd looked exhausted. As I reached my car, my phone vibrated. An unknown number. Unknown. I know today was unexpected. A second message appeared. I'm not asking you to rescue me. I'm asking for one honest conversation. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I looked back toward the training facility. The lights inside were still on. For reasons I couldn't explain, I didn't drive away. The next morning, I found Mason exactly where he said he'd be. Not on the practice field. Not surrounded by cameras. He was sitting alone in a quiet corner of the team's community cafe, wearing a gray hoodie instead of his usual team jacket. Without the spotlight, he looked less like a superstar and more like a guy who hadn't slept much. You came, he said with a surprised smile. I said I'd listen, I replied. I didn't say yes. Fair enough. He slid a cup of coffee toward me. I remembered your order. I raised an eyebrow. We've talked once. You ordered a black coffee yesterday before the sponsor meeting. You noticed that? I notice more than people think. I couldn't help smiling. That's either impressive or a little creepy. He laughed. I'll take impressive. For the next 30 minutes, Mason explained everything. The fake relationship would last 6 weeks. There would be public appearances, a charity gala, and a handful of social media photos. No contracts, he said. No pretending when we're alone. If either of us wants out, we stop. And what do I get out of this? He thought for a second. Honestly, a friend. I hope. That answer caught me off guard. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. His face tightened. My agent. He declined the call without reading the message. Everything okay? I asked. It will be. There was something in his voice that didn't match his confident image. Almost before I realized it, I heard myself say, I'll do it. He looked up. You mean it? I mean it. Relief washed across his face. Thank you.
Nos paakas, Ibarnat.
I'm still convinced this is a terrible idea. He laughed. It probably is. 2 days later, our first public appearance arrived. The Chicago Children's Sports Foundation hosted a fundraising event, and photographers packed the entrance. You ready? Mason asked. Not even a little. Just stay close. The moment we stepped out of the SUV, camera flashes exploded around us. Mason, who's your boyfriend? How long have you been together? My heart pounded. Without warning, Mason reached for my hand. His fingers wrapped around mine. Warm. Steady. He leaned close enough that only I could hear him. Sorry. I should have warned you. I squeezed his hand back. It's okay. Inside, reporters continued asking questions, but Mason answered every one with calm confidence. We're enjoying getting to know each other. We'd appreciate a little privacy. For someone pretending, he sounded surprisingly sincere. The next morning, every sports website had the same headline. Football captain finally confirms relationship. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Friends, former co-workers, even my cousin texted. Since when are you dating Mason Carter? I sighed. This is getting out of hand. Across the office, Mason looked guilty. I told you it would be a circus. You forgot to mention I'd become part of it.
I'm sorry.
I know. His apology felt genuine. That made it difficult to stay annoyed. A week passed, then another. The pretending became easier. Every Wednesday, we'd grab lunch after practice. Every Friday, I'd help him review business presentations for sponsor meetings. In return, He'd insist on walking me to my apartment after late design sessions. "You know you don't have to keep doing this," I told him one evening. "It's dark. I can handle walking 3 blocks." "I know. So why are you here?" He shrugged. "I sleep better knowing you got home safely." The words were simple, but they stayed with me long after he left. A few days later, I arrived at practice carrying lunch for both of us. As I walked toward the field, I heard raised voices. A teammate named Ryan folded his arms. "This fake boyfriend thing is getting ridiculous." Another player laughed. "Probably just another publicity stunt." Neither of them knew I was standing behind the equipment truck. Mason answered immediately. "Watch what you say." Ryan rolled his eyes. "You've changed."
No.
"I've stopped pretending to care what everyone thinks." The field went silent. Ryan walked away shaking his head. Mason never noticed I'd overheard the conversation. Neither did the rest of the team. I quietly turned around and headed back toward the parking lot. For the first time, I realized he had defended me when he didn't have to. The following weekend, Mason invited me to watch a charity football clinic. Dozens of children ran across the field wearing oversized helmets. The moment they saw Mason, they surrounded him. He signed footballs, tied loose shoelaces, knelt to talk with nervous kids at eye level. One little boy refused to join a drill. Instead of asking a coach to handle it, Mason sat beside him on the grass. They talked for nearly 10 minutes. Eventually, the boy smiled and ran onto the field. "You didn't have to do that," I said later. "I know. So why did you?" "When I was his age, one coach believed in me." He looked toward the children laughing together. "I've been trying to return that favor ever since." I found myself seeing a completely different side of him. Not the athlete, not the celebrity, just Mason. That evening, heavy traffic forced us to take the scenic route back into the city. Neither of us spoke much. Finally, he broke the silence. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. What's the biggest misconception people have about you?" I laughed. "That I'm shy. Aren't you?"
I'm careful.
"There's a difference." He nodded thoughtfully. "My turn. What's the biggest misconception about you?" He stared out the window. "That confidence means happiness." His voice barely rose above a whisper. "Most days, people only see the version of me that's useful to them." I didn't know what to say, so I didn't. Sometimes silence says more than advice ever could. After a long moment, he smiled. "Thanks. I didn't do anything. You stayed." A few nights later, the team celebrated an important win at a rooftop restaurant. Music echoed across the terrace. Players laughed around long tables. I wasn't used to these events, but Mason insisted I come. Halfway through the evening, one of the team's longtime sponsors arrived with his daughter, Olivia. She greeted Mason with a cheerful hug. "It's been forever." "It has." She kissed his cheek before joining another group. It happened in less than 3 seconds. Perfectly innocent, but something inside me shifted. I looked away before Mason noticed. For the rest of the night, I laughed at the right moments, answered questions, smiled for photos, yet every smile felt a little harder than the one before. As everyone began leaving, Mason caught up with me outside. "Everything okay?" "Yeah." "You've been quiet." "I'm just tired." He studied my face. "You sure?" I forced another smile. "Good night, Mason." Before he could say another word, I climbed into a rideshare and closed the door. As the car pulled away, I glanced back through the window. He was still standing on the sidewalk, watching me leave with a confused expression. And for the first time since we'd agreed to fake this relationship, I wasn't sure which feelings were real anymore. The following Monday, I buried myself in work. New logo concepts,
Sponsor mockups.
website revisions, anything that kept my mind busy. It didn't work. Every time my phone lit up with Mason's name, I let it ring. "Mason, did I do something wrong?" I didn't answer. An hour later, "Mason, can we talk?" Still nothing. By evening, another message appeared. "Please don't disappear without telling me why." I stared at the screen for a long time before locking my phone. If this relationship was fake, then why did seeing Olivia kiss his cheek hurt so much? 3 days passed. The silence between us became impossible to ignore. During a sponsor photo shoot, we stood only a few feet apart. The photographer frowned. Closer. We stepped forward. A little more. Mason looked at me. You okay? I'm fine. You've said exactly 3 words to me all morning. I'm just tired. He sighed. No, Ethan. You're avoiding me. The photographer interrupted. Smile, guys. We did. The camera captured what looked like a happy couple. The truth couldn't have been further away. Later that afternoon, Mason caught up with me outside the design office. Ethan. I kept walking. Ethan. He gently touched my arm. I stopped. Talk to me. There's nothing to talk about. There obviously is. I finally looked at him. You don't owe me explanations. What does that mean? We both know this ends in a few weeks. So I shouldn't have forgotten that. His expression changed. You think this is about the agreement? Isn't it?
No.
Then what is it? He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For the first time since we'd met, Mason Carter didn't know what to say. That night, neither of us slept much. The next morning, Coach Daniels called everyone into the film room. The championship is in 10 days. His voice echoed through the room. I don't care about interviews. I don't care about headlines. I care about football. His eyes landed on Mason. You've been distracted. I'm fine, coach.
No.
You're not. The room fell silent. After the meeting ended, teammates quietly filed out. Only Mason remained. Coach closed the door. You've carried this team for years. But lately, he paused. You're playing like your head is somewhere else. Mason looked down. It is. Meanwhile, I tried convincing myself I was making the right decision. I stopped joining Mason for lunch. Stopped waiting after practice. Stopped answering late-night texts. The distance was supposed to make everything easier. Instead, every day felt heavier. Friday afternoon brought another surprise. My best friend, Ava, dropped by the office carrying 2 iced coffees. She handed me one. You look terrible. Thanks. I mean emotionally. I figured. She sat across from me. So, when are you going to tell him? Tell him what? That you've fallen for him. I nearly choked on my coffee. I haven't. She raised one eyebrow. Ethan. You smile every time he walks into a room. You defend him even when nobody's criticizing him. You've memorized his coffee order. I looked away. It's complicated.
No.
She smiled softly. You're making it complicated. That evening, Mason stood alone on the practice field long after everyone else had left. He threw football after football toward an empty target. None of them landed where he wanted. Another pass. Too high. Another. Too wide. Finally, he kicked the equipment bag across the field. Damn it. You've never yelled at a football before. Mason turned. Assistant coach Lewis walked over. Bad day. You could say that. Lewis picked up one of the footballs. I've known you 5 years. You've never been afraid of losing games. Mason stared toward the empty stadium seats. I'm not afraid of losing football. What are you afraid of? He answered so quietly it barely sounded like words. Losing him. Coach Lewis smiled. I was wondering when you'd figure it out. Mason blinked. You knew. I knew something mattered. You smile differently when Ethan's around. Mason laughed under his breath. I thought I was hiding it. You weren't. The next morning, Mason showed up outside my apartment building. I almost turned around when I saw him. Instead, I walked over. What are you doing here? I've been calling. I know. You haven't answered. I know. He took a slow breath. I need 5 minutes. I don't think that's a good idea. Please. Something in his voice stopped me from walking away. We sat on a nearby park bench. Neither of us spoke at first. Finally, Mason broke the silence. Olivia. I looked at him. What about her? She's engaged. I frowned. What? She kissed my cheek because she hadn't seen me in months. Her fiancé was inside talking to sponsors. I blinked. I've been trying to tell you that for days. Heat rushed to my face. I misunderstood. I know.
I'm sorry.
He shook his head. I'm not upset because you misunderstood. Then why? Because instead of asking me, his voice cracked slightly, you shut me out. Neither of us moved. The air between us felt painfully honest. Just as I opened my mouth to apologize, a black SUV pulled up beside the sidewalk. The driver's door opened. A tall man in an expensive navy suit stepped out. Silver hair, sharp expression, confident posture. Mason's face immediately changed. Dad. The older man barely acknowledged me. We need to talk. Now. Mason stood. It can wait. It can't. His father glanced toward me. So this is him. There wasn't anger in his voice. Only cold calculation. He extended a hand. Ethan.
I'm Richard Carter.
I shook it politely. It's nice to meet you. I wish the circumstances were different. He turned back to Mason. The board meeting has been moved. The gala is next weekend. And this relationship, he looked directly at me, needs to end before then. My stomach dropped. Mason's jaw tightened. We're not discussing this here. We're discussing it now. His father's tone never rose. It didn't need to. I've spent decades protecting this family's reputation. I won't watch you throw away opportunities over a publicity mistake. I'm not making a mistake. Richard stepped closer. You have responsibilities. You are the face of this organization. You don't get to make decisions based on feelings. The words hung in the air. Mason looked torn between anger and duty. Finally, after several long seconds, he said quietly, I'll handle it. His father nodded once. I expect you will. The SUV drove away. Silence settled over the sidewalk. I looked at Mason. You don't have to explain. Ethan.
No.
I forced a small smile that didn't feel real. I get it. Before he could stop me, I turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard him call my name once. Then again. I kept walking, because from where I stood, it sounded like he'd just chosen his future, and I had no idea that the hardest choice of his life was still waiting for him. Championship Day arrived beneath a bright autumn sky. The entire city seemed to be wearing Chicago Titans colors. Fans packed the stadium hours before kickoff. Television crews filled the sidelines. Commentators called it the biggest game of Mason Carter's career. From the outside, everything looked perfect. From where I stood in the design team's media section, nothing felt right. It had been 6 days since we'd spoken. 6 days since I'd walked away. I told myself I was only there because the team had hired me. That was only half the truth. The other half was standing on the 50-yard line, warming up alone. Mason looked toward the stands for just a second. Our eyes met. Then the whistle blew. The game started badly. A dropped pass. An overthrown ball. A missed opportunity. The commentators sounded confused. That's unusual for Mason. He doesn't normally make mistakes like this. Coach Daniels called a timeout. The offense gathered around him. Mason. The coach's voice stayed calm. What's going on? I'm letting everyone down.
No.
Coach shook his head. You're letting one thing distract you. He rested a hand on Mason's shoulder. Football isn't the problem. You already know what is. Mason looked toward the crowd again. This time, he didn't search for the scoreboard. He searched for me. Meanwhile, I sat frozen in my seat. Every mistake he made felt strangely personal. A member of the media team leaned over. You know him pretty well, right? I guess. He hasn't smiled all week. I looked back at the field. Neither had I. Late in the third quarter, the Titans trailed by 4 points. The stadium had gone unusually quiet. Coach Daniels called one final timeout. The players formed a circle. You've spent your whole life proving yourself, the coach said. To fans. To sponsors. To your family. He looked directly at Mason. Today, you only need to prove something to yourself. The whistle sounded. The team ran back onto the field. This time, something had changed. Mason wasn't forcing every play. He trusted his teammates. He stopped trying to carry the entire game alone. One careful drive became another. A long completion moved them into scoring position. With less than a minute remaining, the Titans scored the winning touchdown. The stadium erupted. Confetti burst into the air. Fans celebrated. Cameras rushed toward the players. Reporters shouted Mason's name. But instead of lifting the championship trophy first, Mason handed it to his teammates. "I'll catch up," he said. Without another word, he jogged toward the tunnel. I watched him disappear. Something told me exactly where he was going. Without thinking, I left the media area. I walked through the nearly empty corridors beneath the stadium. The celebration echoed somewhere above me. Eventually, I pushed open the door leading back to the field. The lights were still shining. The crowd had begun leaving. The stadium suddenly felt enormous, quiet, peaceful. I walked to the same section of seats where we'd taken our first fake couple photo weeks earlier. I sat down. For the first time all season, there was nothing left to pretend. A minute later, footsteps echoed across the concrete. I didn't have to turn around. I knew who it was. Mason sat beside me. Neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable anymore. Felt honest. Finally, he smiled. "I've been looking everywhere. I figured. You always come here when you need to think." I looked at him. "How did you know that?" "I've been paying attention." I laughed softly. "You really do notice everything." "Not everything." He looked down. I almost missed the most important thing. A cool breeze drifted through the empty stadium. Mason took a slow breath. "My father wanted me to end this." "I know." He said choosing my own happiness would cost me opportunities. I stayed quiet. I almost believed him. He shook his head. Then I realized something. "What?" "I've spent years winning games, signing contracts, making everyone proud. But none of those moments ever made me feel the way I do when I'm with you." I felt my heart racing. He continued before I could interrupt. "When this started, I thought I needed someone to play a role. Instead," his voice softened, "I found the one person who never asked me to be anyone except myself." I looked away, trying to steady my breathing. "Mason," he smiled gently, "I know the agreement is over." It ended the moment I realized I didn't want to pretend anymore. I finally looked back at him. I was scared. "I know. I thought I'd become just another chapter in your public image. You never were. I should have talked to you instead of running. You should have." He smiled. "And I should have told you how I felt sooner." For a second, neither of us spoke. Then we both laughed at exactly the same time. "I guess we both made a mess of this," I said. "A pretty impressive one." Mason reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out the same plain white business card he'd given me the day we met. "I carry another copy." I smiled. "Why?" "In case I ever needed a second chance." He turned it over. On the back, he'd written one sentence. "No pretending this time." He handed it to me. "So," he asked quietly, "would you go on an actual first date with me?" I looked at the card, then at him. "You know, I've been waiting for you to ask the real question." His grin was impossible to hide. "So is that a yes?" "It's a yes." He stood and offered me his hand, just like he had outside the training facility weeks ago. This time, I took it without hesitation. We walked slowly across the quiet field. No reporters followed us. No cameras flashed. No one expected a performance. Halfway to the tunnel, Mason stopped. "One more thing." "What?" He gently brushed a loose strand of hair away from my forehead. "If this is too soon." "It isn't." He leaned forward slowly, giving me every chance to step back. I didn't. Our lips met in a soft, tender kiss beneath the stadium lights. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't for headlines. It lasted only a few quiet seconds. When we pulled apart, we were both smiling. A week later, The championship celebration was finally over. Life began returning to normal, or at least a new kind of normal. Mason still trained every morning. I still worked on creative projects for the team. But now we met for breakfast because we wanted to, not because we had appearances to make. We explored neighborhood bookstores, tried new coffee shops, argued playfully over movie choices, learned each other's routines, built something real one ordinary day at a time. A month later, the Children's Sports Foundation held another event. The same courtyard, the same entrance, the same place where our fake relationship had first become public. One volunteer recognized us. "I still have the first picture of you two." Mason smiled. "So do we." The volunteer offered to take another. We stood side by side. This time there was no script, no deal, no audience to impress. Just two people choosing each other. The camera clicked. I looked at the photo and laughed. "What?" Mason asked. "Our first picture started with a lie. And this one," I slipped my hand into his, "this one starts with the truth." Mason smiled, squeezed my hand, and together we walked toward our future. No longer pretending, no longer hiding, and finally free to write the rest of our story together. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Do you think Mason and Ethan were always meant to find each other? Or should they have stayed just friends? Leave your answer in the comments. I read as many of them as I can. And if you enjoy emotional, slow-burn gay romance stories with happy endings, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next love story.